Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving into a topic that I think a lot of you will find fascinating.
Ah,
Power laws.
yeah, these aren't the scientific laws you learned in physics class.
Nope, we're talking about the often unspoken rules that shape success and influence.
The kind of laws that can give you an edge in your career, your relationships, even in just navigating everyday life.
Right. And to help us crack the code on these power laws, we're turning to Robert Greene's book, The 48 Laws of Power.
It's a book that's been both praised and criticized, but there's no denying that it offers some intriguing insights into the dynamics of power.
Exactly. And while some of the laws might seem a bit, shall we say, Machiavellian at first glance,
There's a lot we can learn from them about how to navigate the world effectively and, most importantly,
ethically.
exactly. And that's what we're going to focus on today, how to apply these laws in a way that benefits both ourselves and others.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The first law that caught my eye is Law 6. Court attention at all cost. Now, this might sound a bit attention-seeking, but it's really about standing out and making yourself memorable.
Think of it this way. In today's world, we're constantly bombarded with information, with people vying for our attention.
It's like a noisy marketplace.
It is. And if you want to be heard, if you want your ideas to be noticed, you have to find a way to cut through the noise.
So it's not just about being loud or flashy. It's about being strategic in how you present yourself and your ideas.
Exactly. Now, when you think of someone who mastered the art of attention getting, who comes to mind?
Well, for me, it's got to be P.T. Barnum.
The master showman himself.
He was brilliant at creating a spectacle. He staged outrageous events, sometimes even hoaxes, to draw crowds to his circus.
And it worked. He understood that even negative attention was better than no attention at all.
But how do we translate those kind of tactics into something that's less, well, circusy and more applicable to, say, building a career or advancing a cause we care about?
Well, instead of thinking of it as creating a spectacle, think of it as showcasing your unique talents and expertise.
Okay, so how do you stand out in a way that's authentic and doesn't feel like you're trying too hard?
I think it starts with being genuine. Don't try to be someone you're not. Focus on what you're passionate about, what you excel at, and find ways to share that with the world.
So it's about building a personal brand that reflects your true self and the value you bring to the table.
Exactly. Think about it. If you're applying for a job, don't just submit a generic resume. Find ways to highlight your unique skills and accomplishments in a way that makes you stand out from the crowd.
Okay, now for a law that sounds a little more ethically tricky. Law 7. Get others to do the work for you, but always take the credit. This one has red flag written all over it.
It does, doesn't it? And honestly, there are plenty of historical examples where this law has been abused.
Thomas Edison comes to mind.
Exactly. He often gets credit for inventing the light bulb, but many others contributed to its development.
And let's not forget Nikola Tesla.
Oh, absolutely. Tesla was a visionary whose work paved the way for many of Edison's inventions, including the AC electrical system.
So while taking credit for the work of others is clearly unethical,
And let's be clear, it is.
there's got to be a way to apply this law in a way that's ethical and actually beneficial.
I think the key lies in delegation and collaboration. No one achieves great things alone. We all rely on the skills and talents of others.
Especially in today's world where teamwork is essential.
Absolutely. So instead of viewing this law as taking credit for someone else's work, reframe it as effectively leveraging the strengths of your team.
So it's less about stealing credit and more about leading effectively, giving clear direction, and empowering your team to succeed.
Right. And an essential part of that is recognizing and acknowledging the contributions of everyone involved.
Giving credit where credit is due.
Exactly. Make sure your team members feel valued and appreciated for their contributions. That's how you build a strong, cohesive, and successful team.
Okay, this next law seems a bit counterintuitive. Law 12. Use selective honesty and generosity to disarm your victim. Now, shouldn't we always strive to be honest?
We should. But this law is less about being dishonest and more about understanding the psychology of persuasion.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, think about it. When someone is overly guarded, suspicious, it's hard to get through to them.
They're putting up walls, basically.
Exactly. But a well-placed act of honesty or generosity can lower those walls, making them more receptive to your ideas.
So you're basically creating an opening.
Right. Now, I know this sounds a bit manipulative,
It does.
and it can be if used unethically. Think about con artists. They often use this tactic to gain people's trust before swindling them.
Like that infamous yellow kid Weil. He was a master at using fake generosity to lure people into his elaborate cons.
Exactly. But there's a way to apply this law ethically. Think about it in the context of building relationships or negotiating a deal.
Okay, so instead of viewing it as a way to disarm a victim, think of it as building rapport and trust.
Exactly. Start from a place of genuine honesty and transparency. Be willing to offer concessions where appropriate to create a win-win situation.
So it's about finding common ground, building trust, and creating a foundation for a mutually beneficial relationship.
Yes. And that's a far cry from manipulation. Now, how about this one? Law 13. When asking for help, appeal to people's self-interest, never to their mercy or gratitude. This one sounds a bit cold, doesn't it?
It does sound a bit transactional, like you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
Well, it's not quite that simple. It's more about understanding human motivation. People are more likely to help you if they see a clear benefit to themselves.
So it's less about begging for favors and more about framing your request in a way that highlights how helping you would benefit them as well.
Exactly. Remember that deep dive we did on ancient Greece?
Oh, yeah. I loved that one.
Well, remember how the Athenians decided to ally with Corcyra against Corinth? It wasn't out of some sense of loyalty or obligation. It was because it served their own strategic interests.
It was a calculated move to maintain their power and influence in the region.
Right. And this principle applies in everyday life as well. Let's say you need a colleague's help on a project. Instead of saying, hey, I'm drowning here, can you please help me out?
Which, let's be honest, is tempting to say sometimes.
It is. But a more effective approach would be to say something like, hey, I know you have a lot of expertise in this area, and I think your insights would be invaluable to this project. It would be great to collaborate with you on this.
So you're basically highlighting how their contribution would not only benefit the project, but also give them an opportunity to showcase their skills.
Exactly. It's a win-win. You get the help you need, and they get to demonstrate their value to the team.
Okay, this next one is a bit more, well, strategic. Law 17. Keep others in suspended terror. Cultivate an air of unpredictability. This sounds like something a Bond villain would say.
It does have a bit of a sinister ring to it, doesn't it? But hear me out. This law is about understanding that humans crave predictability.
We like to know what to expect.
We do. It makes us feel safe, in control. But when someone is unpredictable,
It throws us off balance.
it does. And that can give you a psychological advantage. Think about Confederate General Stonewall Jackson during the Civil War. His unpredictable movements and strategies kept Union forces constantly on edge.
He was a master of keeping his enemies guessing.
He was. Now, obviously, we're not talking about waging war here. But there are ways to apply this principle ethically in everyday life.
Okay, so how do we cultivate an air of unpredictability without becoming, erratic or unreliable?
It's about introducing calculated spontaneity into situations where it can give you an edge. For example, let's say you're in a business negotiation.
High-stakes stuff.
It is, and in those situations, it can be beneficial to hold back some of your cards. Don't reveal your entire strategy right away. Keep the other side guessing a little bit.
So you're keeping them on their toes, making them work harder to figure out your next move.
Exactly. And that can give you leverage. It can also be helpful in creative fields. Don't be afraid to break from your usual patterns, to surprise your audience with something unexpected.
It's about keeping things fresh, keeping people engaged.
Exactly. Now, let's talk about a law that might make some people uncomfortable. Law 33. Discover each man's thumbscrew.
Okay, that sounds a bit manipulative.
Yeah.
Like you're looking for someone's weakness to exploit.
I understand why you'd say that, and to be honest, this law can be used for nefarious purposes.
Like those robber barons of the Gilded Age. They were masters at manipulating the stock market by playing on people's greed and fear.
They were, and that's a prime example of how this law can be abused. But at its core, it's about understanding human motivation. It's about recognizing that everyone has something they deeply desire, something that drives their actions.
So instead of viewing it as finding someone's thumbscrew to inflict pain,
Right.
think of it as understanding their needs, their values, what makes them tick.
Exactly. And this is incredibly valuable in fields like sales and marketing. If you understand what motivates your customers, what they truly value.
You can tailor your message, your product, your approach to meet those needs.
Precisely. It's about creating a genuine connection with your audience by showing that you understand them on a deeper level.
So it's not about exploiting vulnerabilities. It's about creating a win-win situation where both parties benefit.
Right. Now, how about this one? Law 40, despise the free lunch.
What's wrong with a free lunch? Everyone loves a freebie.
True. But this law is about recognizing that nothing in life is truly free. There are always strings attached, hidden costs, or unintended consequences.
It's like those free trials that automatically charge your credit card after a month if you don't cancel.
Exactly. Or those free seminars that are really just thinly veiled sales pitches.
You think you're getting something for nothing, but you often end up paying in some way, whether it's with your time, your money, or even your privacy.
Right. Remember that story about the Diamond Field hoax?
Oh, yeah. Where a group of investors was lured to a remote location with the promise of free diamonds.
Exactly. They were so focused on the free part that they overlooked the obvious red flags. It turned out to be a scam, and they lost a fortune.
It's a reminder that we should be wary of anything that seems too good to be true.
And that there's often real value in investing in yourself and your ventures. When you pay for something, you're more likely to value it, to put in the work, and to see a return on your investment.
Okay, before we move on to the next set of laws, I want to emphasize something really important. These power laws, while fascinating and insightful, should be approached with caution.
Absolutely. They're tools, and like any tool, they can be used for good or for ill.
We've seen examples of both throughout history.
Exactly. The key is to use this knowledge responsibly, ethically, and with a clear understanding of the potential consequences.
So as we continue our deep dive into the 48 laws of power, keep that in mind. It's not about winning at all costs.
It's about using your influence to create positive change in the world.
And to do that, we need to act with integrity and a strong sense of ethics.
Well said. It's amazing how some of these laws highlight the subtle aspects of power, like perception, and how it can be just as important as reality.
Yeah, it's like, it doesn't matter how great you are if nobody knows about it.
Exactly. And that brings us to our next law. Law 41. Avoid stepping into a great man's shoes. It's about the challenges of following in the footsteps of someone legendary.
Like imagine trying to be the next Steve Jobs or taking over for Tom Brady. The comparisons would be relentless.
Exactly. And that constant comparison can be crippling. It's almost like whatever comes first always seems more original, more impressive. You're constantly being measured against that.
Makes sense.
But,
Do you have any examples of this playing out in history?
well, think of poor Louis XV. He became king of France after his great-grandfather, Louis XIV, the Sun King.
Yeah.
The one who built Versailles and expanded French power all over the globe.
Talk about a tough act to follow. Like, how do you top that?
Right. And sadly, even with all the advantages of being king, Louis XV's reign was seen as a decline. He just couldn't escape the shadow of his predecessor.
It's like trying to remake The Godfather. You're almost guaranteed to disappoint.
It is. So how do we apply this law in everyday life? I mean, most of us aren't inheriting thrones or leading empires.
Hey, good point. So what's the takeaway here?
It's about recognizing that we all have our own unique strengths and talents. Don't try to replicate someone else's success. Focus on forging your own path.
So if you get promoted into a role previously held by a rock star, don't try to be them. Be yourself, lean into your strengths, and make the role your own.
Precisely. It's about innovation and not being afraid to break away from established patterns, which leads perfectly to our next law. Law 42, strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter.
Okay, this one sounds a bit intense.
Well, it can be, but it's really about understanding group dynamics. Think of it this way. The shepherd is the leader, the central figure that holds a group together.
So take out the leader, and the group loses direction. Chaos ensues.
Exactly. A great example is, well, the French Revolution again. Marie Antoinette was beloved by the people, at least initially. But when things went south, she became a symbol of everything wrong with the monarchy.
So she became the shepherd that the revolutionaries needed to target to dismantle the whole system.
Exactly. And this principle applies to modern organizations, too. If you want to shake things up, sometimes it's more effective to focus on those key figures who are holding back progress.
Okay, so it's not about being ruthless, but more about understanding how power works within a group.
Exactly. Now, for a law that's a bit more, well, positive. Law 43, work on the hearts and minds of others.
This one sounds a lot less, Machiavellian.
It is. It emphasizes that true power lies in persuasion, not force or coercion. It's about winning people over to your way of thinking.
It's about getting them to buy into your vision.
Precisely. And one of the best examples of this is, believe it or not, Genghis Khan, the fearsome Mongol warrior.
Oh, yeah, not exactly known for his diploma.
Well, initially, he was set on wiping out Chinese culture. He just saw the land as grazing pastures for his horses.
So it changed his mind.
One of his advisors, a man named Yalu Chukai, recognized the value and sophistication of Chinese culture. So he appealed to Khan, not with threats, but by highlighting the benefits of integrating Chinese knowledge and skills into the empire.
So he basically made a business case for cultural preservation. It's pretty clever.
It was, and it worked. Khan spared the Chinese and ended up adopting aspects of their culture into his own. It's a powerful example of how persuasion can trump brute force.
It shows that understanding and empathy can be incredibly powerful tools.
Absolutely. Okay, let's dive into a law that sounds a little more tactical. Law 44, disarm and infuriate with the mirror effect.
Ooh, this sounds intriguing and maybe a little dangerous.
Well, it can be if misused. It's about reflecting someone's own behavior back at them, kind of like holding up a mirror. It can disarm them, expose their flaws, and even turn their tactics against them.
So like if someone's being aggressive, you mirror that aggression back at them.
It's not necessarily about matching their intensity, but more about strategically reflecting their approach. It's like a subtle form of judo.
So how can this be used ethically? It sounds like it could easily slip into manipulation.
You're right, it's a fine line. Let's say you're in a disagreement with someone who's being stubborn and closed-minded. Instead of arguing, you could try mirroring their behavior, not in a mocking way, but in a way that shows you understand their perspective.
So like acknowledge their concerns, maybe rephrase their points back to them to show you're listening.
Exactly. Sometimes seeing their own behavior reflected back can help people become more self-aware, leading to a more productive conversation.
It's like saying, hey, I see what you're doing here. Is this really how you want to come across?
Exactly. It can be a powerful tool for diffusing tension and fostering understanding. Now let's move on to Law 45. Preach the need for change, but never reform too much at once.
This sounds like a lesson a lot of leaders could benefit from. Change can be scary, especially if it's too much too fast.
You're right. People crave stability and familiarity. Drastic change can lead to pushback and resistance.
It's like trying to change someone's diet overnight. It's just not going to stick.
Exactly. Think of the English Reformation. Oliver Cromwell wanted to make England a purely Protestant nation, but his attempts to enforce rapid change led to unrest and, ultimately, his own downfall.
He pushed too hard too fast.
He did. It's a reminder that whether you're leading a team, an organization, or even just trying to change your own habits, gradual change is usually more effective.
Baby steps.
Yes. Bring people along with you. Don't force them to jump off a cliff.
Okay, let's talk about a law that seems particularly relevant in today's social media-driven world. Law 46, never appear too perfect.
This one's interesting. We're constantly bombarded with images of perfection.
Right, everyone's trying to present their best selves online, but it can feel so inauthentic.
Exactly. And this law reminds us that while striving for excellence is important, appearing too perfect can backfire. It can breed resentment and envy.
It's like that saying, the tallest tree catches the most wind.
It is. Think of Michelangelo. His rival, Bramante, was so envious of his talent that he tried to sabotage his work on the Sistine Chapel.
Wow, some people just can't handle other people's success.
It's true. And this law reminds us that a bit of humility can go a long way. It makes you more relatable and approachable.
So don't be afraid to show your flaws and imperfections. It makes you human.
Exactly. Now, this next law is something I think we can all relate to. Law 47. Do not go past the mark you aimed for. In victory, learn when to stop.
In other words, quit while you're ahead.
You could say that. It's about recognizing that even when you're winning, there's a point where pushing further can lead to overextension and ultimately failure.
Like in poker, knowing when to fold is just as important as knowing when to bet.
Precisely. A classic example of this is Cyrus the Great. He was an incredible military leader, achieved amazing victories, but he kept pushing eastward, expanding his empire until it became too much to handle.
He got greedy, basically.
He did. And it ultimately led to his downfall. It's a reminder that sometimes the smartest move is to consolidate your gains, savor your victories, and not get caught up in chasing the next big thing.
It's like that saying, leave them wanting more.
Exactly. Okay, are you ready for the final law? This one's a bit abstract.
Bring it on.
All right, here it is. Law 48. Assume formlessness.
Okay, I have to admit that one sounds a bit mysterious. What does it mean to assume formlessness?
Think of it like water. It takes the shape of whatever container it's in. It's adaptable, fluid, and ultimately incredibly powerful.
So be like water, huh? Interesting.
It is. A great historical example is the Japanese approach to cultural exchange. For centuries, they seemed to readily adopt foreign customs and influences. But this adaptability was a way to preserve their own cultural identity.
So it was a subtle form of resistance. They appeared to conform, but they were actually maintaining their inner strength.
Exactly. And I think this is a crucial lesson for us today. In a world that's constantly changing, being adaptable, open to new ideas, and willing to adjust our approach is essential.
It's about being flexible, not rigid.
Right. And with that, we conclude our exploration of the 48 Laws of Power.
That was an incredible journey. So much to think about.
It really was. We've uncovered some fascinating insights into the dynamics of power and influence. You know, it's fascinating how these 48 laws of power can be applied to so many different aspects of life.
Right, we've talked about everything from career advancement to social dynamics to historical figures.
And it's amazing how relevant these laws remain, even though they were written centuries ago.
Yeah, it really shows that human nature, especially when it comes to power and influence, is pretty timeless.
It is. So as we wrap up our deep dive, is there any particular law that stands out to you as being especially relevant in today's world?
That's a tough one. There are so many good ones, but I keep coming back to Law 43, work on the hearts and minds of others. It just seems so crucial, especially now with all the division and polarization we see.
I agree. That one really resonates with me too. It's a reminder that true power comes from connection, from persuasion, not from force or coercion.
Right. It's about winning people over, not beating them down.
Exactly. And it requires empathy, understanding, a willingness to see things from other people's perspectives.
Which can be challenging, especially when you strongly disagree with someone.
It definitely can be. But that's where the real work lies, right?
Yeah.
It's easy to preach to the choir, to surround yourself with people who already agree with you.
But to really make a difference in the world, to create meaningful change, you need to be able to connect with people who see things differently.
Absolutely. And Law 43 gives us a framework for doing just that. It's about finding that common ground, that shared humanity that can bridge those divides.
It's about building relationships, fostering trust, and creating a space for open and honest dialogue.
And ultimately, I think that's how we create a more just, equitable, and harmonious world.
Well said. So, to all our listeners out there, we encourage you to reflect on these 48 laws of power. Think about which ones resonate with you the most.
And consider how you might apply them in your own life, ethically and effectively, to achieve your goals and make a positive impact on the world around you.
Remember, these laws are tools. Use them wisely, use them for good, and always with a strong sense of ethics.
And never underestimate the power of connecting with others on a deeper level. That's where true influence lies.
Beautifully said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the 48 laws of power. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep using your power for good.
And remember, be like water.